Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Steve. I'm got videos on this channel for the Atari computer, 800 computer, and that's what this session is going to be focused on. I haven't put an Atari video out in a while, so excuse me on that. And I probably won't be putting out a programming video unless I can actually hook up my Atari to my TV and all that stuff again, because I moved to another apartment months ago and, well, it's all packed up again. But I thought I would kind of review the magazines and kind of the history of the Atari magazines during that generation. So that's what this video is going to be focused on. Okay, what you see here is one of the first issues of Antic. I'll kind of zoom in here a little bit. Probably can't see it really good, but if you look up here, this is actually the December-January issue of 1983, which is when Antic actually first came into introduction. I don't believe there was anything before that. And I only know that that's probably a fact because I ordered all the Antic magazines when they had a special, and they gave me every single issue that they had to date, which was from 1983 to December 1987. And at that year, it was already like 1989 or so. So, what I wanted to kind of do is explain, I don't really have a lot of history I can really tell you about the Antic magazine, but they started out as a magazine, obviously, and they weren't yet a disc subscription service, because I think this was actually before the disc drive, if I'm not mistaken. The cassette recorder was still in use, and there wasn't a disc drive invented yet at that time. I'd like to be able to track, where they found that in the magazine, but I haven't done a lot of research on that, so I'm not going to be able to go in. But we'll go along and see how this goes. This is just one of the first issues. I'll try not to go through this very quickly and very long, because it can get kind of boring if I show you every single magazine, because I have stacks of them here. But I'm going to kind of go through like I said, this will be the Antic magazine. I'll show the Analog magazine. Well, actually, after the Antic, they went into the Start magazine in 1991, I believe it was, when Start started dominating. The Atari ST dominated the scene, and Antic moved to the back of the magazine. And I got those very last issues, so I was pretty fortunate to be in possession of those last issues, which probably will worth some money someday, maybe, I don't know. The only thing is, you can probably see here, unfortunately, I haven't really taken good care of the magazines. I'm kind of a poor sport on that, and I guess it's something I need to work on, but maybe I'll order some, plastic slips or whatever, and case them and stuff like that. But anyways, these are just some of the earliest programs. Hopefully you can see this pretty good. You'll see Atari Tree, Model Station, and you can get these online in PDFs, by the way. I'll try to find the sites and link those to my YouTube documentation. But these are some of the first programmers or programs that they developed. And this is probably before they even really had any contributors. I don't really see anybody here that looks like, well, there were a few contributors here. David Plotkin, he was one of the contributors to Antic magazine. I remember a lot of his stuff because he wrote some pretty cool games in those days. There's still a gaming industry was pretty hot. The Atari 2600 was slowly coming onto the scene and kind of, dominating the homes in the market at that time. So David Plotkin wrote some pretty cool games. So, and the other thing here is there is an introduction here to assembly language, which is probably where I first got my interest in it, which may have came later, but I first, was introduced to assembly language here by reading this issue. So, kind of scan through here a little bit, and they had something they started with called an I/O board. I think they changed this as they went through, but these are basically the questionnaires that the users had, questions that the users had about particular issues, and this stuff with the programs. So this might even be an issue before this, because I noticed somebody saying you're listing with this issue, so I may have not got the very first issue then, so excuse me on that. And then of course there were the commercials, advertisements, and here's one of their first programs. Oh no, that's just probably this Engineer My First Computer Game, somebody talking about a game or something they developed for one of these publishers. Here's one called the Atari Tree. I'll try not to go and bore you too long with these, but get some of the better details here, since I did mention here's a music program, and you see some of the things I wanted to go over here was the assembly language. Let me see where that begins, right here. So in this section here, it's called the string search subroutine. This actually was the first time I really seen assembly language, since at that time I did not own the Atari. You've seen this on my channel before, but I thought I'd bring it here. I didn't own this book yet, Mapping the Atari. I bought this later, after I started learning about the Atari more in depth. But this kind of gave me the first insight into assembly language and what it was, you know. This video isn't going to explain assembly language. This is just a magazine history review, basically. So I'll try not to go too far into this one. Let's see if there's any interesting games in here. You can get these online, so excuse the page flipping here. Let's see. Going through here a little bit. I like the way they did some of their advertisements. Here's one of the first games I ever saw in the Antic magazine I typed in. It was called Bats. And if I recall correctly, I didn't have to type these in because I ordered a disc subscription, so I had every single copy of these programs on disc. That's the 5 1/4 inch disc. So, let's see if there's anything else in here. Here's kind of what the first computer, I think this is probably it right here. The first Atari computer looked like. I think it was called Atari 400. I didn't have a 400. I had a 65 XT in at that time, which was in 1987. There's some of the games that were common. Remember I mentioned earlier about the Atari games? You can see here they kind of carried over to the Atari home computer because they have Pac-Man here. And I don't know if these other ones are recognizable. Choplifter, that's an Atari 2600 game. So they eventually carried over to the Atari 800 computer as it started dominating the scene more. Here's a popular one those days, Miner 2049er. Like I said, you can get these online, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I just wanted to kind of give an introduction. See in the back of the magazine here, let's do that. More advertisements, but they jam-pack these with advertisements. Here's something called their directories. These were a lot of the Atari companies that were existent in those days. Try to scoot this up more. Let's see, buyer's guide. I think these were products they were selling. Hard to see at this angle, so let's see here. Yeah, these were probably games and different utilities they had. Let's see, yeah, utility programs. Okay. They were mostly a game magazine. They didn't really sell a whole lot of utilities. They did have some. You know, of course, there's a better view of the Atari 400. That's what it looked like in 1983. And you always had to hook it up to the old TVs. And that is probably standard on the black and white TVs if you were like me and couldn't afford a color television. My parents had one color television, but I had my own black and white TV, so I hooked it up to that using the switch box and all that stuff. There's a closer shot of the Atari 400 right there. And more advertisements for their games. But you can kind of see that that's the first issue. And they kind of carried over. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here. I'll show you the next issue for the next year. This was 1984. The camera to grab focus. 1984. Now let's see what the transition had taken place then. I'll try not to make these too long. I know this video is going to be very long. The same thing, they kind of stuck with here at the very beginning, their questionnaire, their I/O board. They left that in. More of their advertisements, of course. Excuse me a second here. Snaps was a pretty popular manufacturer on the scene in those days. I preferred the Blue Max. That was a pretty cool game. I don't know if you can see that very well here, but actually it's off the screen here. The Blue Max is over there. It's right here in the top corner. Well, actually, I thought that was Blue Max. Well, anyway. Yeah, it's Blue Max. Okay. So, skipping forward now, it looks like I try to go through year by year so we can kind of see the transition that took place here. Now, I'm not giving an in-depth full review. This is not an in-depth full magazine review, guys. It's just to kind of show you the history of the Atari and how they switched. So here you can see Atari tapes. So they were still into the Atari tapes at that time, and some of the devices that they had to connect up to the tape systems that they had in those days manufactured. A lot of people writing in their own articles and stuff like that. There was a lot of graphic article magazines in those days. Here's some other utility software for graphic designers. What's over here? Let's see. Designs, I think. Has your robot hug you today? Looks like some kind of robot design or something. Here, servos were pretty popular with robots in those days. Yep, that's what this one's actually called, servo, which is an electronic component. Okay, so let's see here. I think it's kind of like a motor. I don't really know electronics, but I studied a little bit. It's some kind of a motoring device. Here's something interesting. Printing with different fonts on the neck. This was actually a printer that allows them to print different fonts, so they started experimenting with printing different fonts and getting more output to the screens. Because in those days, I'm pretty sure they still couldn't print the funny characters. I've never really seen. Let me see, maybe they could. I don't know. Yeah, actually they could. There's a heart character there, so they still could print the funny character. I think that was just probably just to show them rotating fonts, so it's some kind of design or something with the fonts they did. Let's see here. So I'm not trying to make this too long. I'm skipping ahead here. And this is a very hard angle to work at, but my neck will thank me later. Here's some of the games dominated the scene at that time. Dig Dug was a pretty popular one. River Raid, right here. This was Kaboom. These were also found on the Atari computer as well. And I know this isn't coming in very, very good. So, those were some of the games they had. And, let's see what's here. This angle is hard to work at. Alright. So, let's see here. More games. Here's some more of their micro screens. They always had people printing in, showing the screens. And sometimes the micro screens would dominate the front cover when they found the best one. I've never seen any of these on the front cover, but eventually they had a contest and people got theirs on the front cover. That was actually on the last December of '83. I didn't show that one, but it was in that magazine. Here's another game they had in those days called Snowbird. That one was kind of cool. You can get these online and, you know, upload them to an emulator, or you just, you know, download them to your emulator. So, let's see. Here I talked about the cassettes earlier. You can still see they were still working with the cassette in those days. I don't have a cassette to show you. I would show you one. I only have like a Commodore cassette, but I used to own an Atari cassette recorder. That was my first device for recording, which basically stored on a little cassette. Here's page flipping. I think this might get into display list, interrupts and screen control. Yeah, screen addressing, it's all in here. This is kind of assembly language stuff. And here's a game. Road Race. I don't know if they have a picture of it or not. Let's see if they do. They didn't. And here you can see those, what are called the ANTIC characters. Or ANTIC characters. Here's some more games and... Okay, so I'll try not to make this video too long. I'm trying to see how long these things are going. I'm in full screen, so lovely me, I can't see how long this one's going to be. Okay, so skipping ahead here. There's Popeye. That was one of the first designs they had for the Atari home computer. I don't know what that one is. Alright, so you can read these online, so I'm not going to go through them real in-depth and everything here. There's Flight Simulator. That was a pretty popular game in those days. But anyways, on to the next one. Next one was in 1985. They had a contest that was going on then. If somebody could basically reproduce this cover, they were going to give away a prize. I don't remember what the prize was, probably some special magazine subscription or something. But yeah, they had this contest. And actually, skip ahead a year, it was probably a disk drive. So this is probably actually when the disk drive came out. In probably 1985, is that what this one is? Yeah, 1985. So 1985, these are just some of the introduction to the program. I'm just kind of looking these over to see if I can see anything here It looks to be a review. DOS, communications, toolbox. Here's they had also called Game of the Month, which were games that you could get if you had ordered their disc subscription. Here's a bonus game, also came with the Game of the Month. And here's more assembly language for those die-hard assembly fans. There it is, actually there's right there, it tells you. They were going to win, for the people that replicated this cover, you were going to win a $400.99 disk drive, which seemed like a pretty good deal. I think that it's got an Indus GT disk drive. I never owned one of those, so I don't really know how good of a deal that was. I know the disk drive was about $200 in those days, so that was probably a pretty good deal. Probably an upgrade from that one. There's some more micro screens. We've seen those examples in my last section. Notice that this thing's going sideways now. Anyway, let's see here. Basic searcher, global search for programmers. Find utility or something. Oh, it helps you find the commands in the Atari computer, programming commands. Let's see here. Here's some of the people, designers of video games that were had interviews. Antic had direct interviews with them. Let's see here. There's a disk drive right there, the Astra 1620. I don't know what that is. I never owned that disk drive, so I don't really know a lot about it. Double side density, 720 kilobytes. I think that was pretty good because they only had 360 kilobytes when it started out. I do remember that, my discs having limited space. Here's some of the text utilities they had. Modifying the text screens. I think that's done with interrupts. I see Mac 65 in here. I assume it's something in the same language, so it's probably an interrupt. Here's some of their tablet cursors they had. I'm skipping some of this stuff because I didn't really have a lot of information I can give you about it, and maybe it might not be of interest to other people, or it might be, I don't know. Let's see here. Here's where they got into when they were really interested in reviewing the internals of the Atari. The electronic people came on the scene and they started designing and submitting their own subscriptions for, you know, modifying components of the Atari. And here's just some of the schematics and stuff they started working with. I was never a big into electronics, so I really never followed these, but they are there if you're interested in learning about it. And you'll get that PDF later. Now here's interesting. Here's where they started breaking down their sections, and you notice all the other ones that showed the code and all the pages. Now eventually the Antic decided to move everything to the back, which I thought was a great idea, because everybody who wanted to go directly to the type-in listings that did not have the magazine subscriptions could go in and type in the code examples that they supplied with each magazine. And I thought that and they kept that. They remained that consistency for a long, long time. So, in fact, all the way to the very end, I don't think they ever parted from it. Let's see here, what else is in here? I know I didn't look at any of the programs in this issue. I should have just kind of seen what these were. I don't think these were very interesting in this one, so I didn't really want to go into detail about them. Utilities mostly. This is like a utilities issue. Here's some more game reviews they had. I showed this one before, but I thought this was one of the best things they ever done. Is they put a hexadecimal and a decimal listing of all the assembly opcodes that you could type into the program. And I've showed these in many of my assembly language videos, so if you watch those you'll be able to see this, and I'll explain it more in detail in those videos, but that's where it came from. And then they got into more, what is this? Probably more advertisements, more of the shops that were existing in those days. There's a lot of service centers. I think that was in the other one too. There's some of the simulation software. I don't know what this is. Probably some of the bigger games or bigger types of software they sold on in the stores in those days. More game reviews. Yeah, I always stuck the game reviews and product reviews in the very back, so kind of separated it from everything. That isolation was pretty good. Here's that Indus GT. The other one was $4.99. This one's $289.95. So this one's probably a second runner up to the other one. So, and of course, that's the end of this one, and we'll move on to the next issue. This is going to take a while to go through all this. This is the 1986 issue. This one's not grabbing the focus. And so you can get these online too, so if you can't see them, just kind of listen to what I'm saying, and you'll learn about the history, the review of your magazines from my knowledge. Here's where you could actually order, in those days, the magazine issues and the disc descriptions. You just basically cut out this thing and you submit it in right here, and it tells you what you want to get, your name, address, and all that stuff, and you just put your credit card. That was pretty common in those days when you wanted to order magazine subscriptions. Now, of course, everything can be done directly on the internet. Here's some more of the programs and features in this issue. Let's see, Dungeon Master's Apprentice. Let's see if there's anything interesting in this one. Not really a whole lot interesting. I'm just starting with the January issues. I know they weren't the best issues, but just to kind of show you the timeline of the Atari. And it would take too long to go through every single issue, so. Here's Map and XL, XC, I don't know what that is. I never got into a lot of these utilities. I was always, fortunately I was younger then, so I was interested more in the games and stuff like that, so. Here's where the magazine, they showed you the picture of the magazine, and then you can order it, of course. Let's see here. Dungeons, Dragon Scorekeeper, and more. I guess for people, in those days, text adventures were pretty common, and they were on the scene, so a lot of people were interested in designing their own scoring systems. I don't know if that's this one. Yeah, it looks like it is. Like, attacker must roll basic 8 to hit, which is modified by 12. I don't know. Anyways, text adventures were pretty common in those days. I wrote a couple on my own. I don't have them to show you anymore, fortunately, because I parted ways with my Atari years ago and threw out, fortunately, all my discs with it. I kept the magazines, though. I think that was probably a smart move, but it would have been better if I kept everything, but I don't know what I was thinking in those days. I was trying to downsize everything. So here's where the Atari ST started coming into existence, and this might have been the year when they developed it, I don't know. They're showing some of the books they had here. So these are like some of the earlier books of the Atari ST. I never owned an Atari ST, so I can't really talk a lot about it. Fortunately, I got an Amiga 500 instead. I decided not to go the Atari route, which I was told the Amiga was far better system. And maybe later I'll do an Amiga review, because I do have a purchased Amiga 500 computer, and I would love to be able to review that with people. But I was never a super guru in their programming department, so I don't really have a lot of great software I could show you. Here's where the Atari started taking over, and this is important later because you'll see where, and I explained this toward the beginning of this video, the entry, that the Atari ST later became so dominant, and since Atari went from a game computer to basically a product computer, and the business started seeing it as a professional system, the Atari ST started dominating everything, and Antic got moved to the back of the magazine. So, and they also, the Antic magazine went away, and basically it got squished in the back. I'll show you that later. But there's a font loader. And so these probably weren't the best to review, but sorry, I don't know how else to do this, guys. Here's some more of them. These are all Atari ST, but here's some of the Atari ST games they had and programs they were coming out in those days. So I'm kind of jumping ahead of this a lot because this is just all Atari ST stuff, and I'm sorry guys, I'm not into the Atari ST. I'm going back here, see if Antic still remains consistent. Somewhere back here, down here, it continues back with Antic. Maybe down here somewhere. Yeah, right on almost the very last page here. Oh wait, that's Atari ST still. Nope, and the very back actually. So they still kept the program listings for the Atari 800 and 400 and all that in the back still, so you can still get access to all that stuff in the back. So if you go online to check out the magazines, just look for the printouts. Green pages usually will direct you right to that part. So That's basically it for that one, so move on to the next one. January 1987. Oops. Doesn't want to stay on here. Kind of move this back a little bit, maybe I'll get a better view here. 1987. Let's see what we had going on with Atari in those days. Here's our I/O board, so they kept the I/O board, that stayed consistent. Here's their flight simulator. I got this flight simulator when I bought an Atari XE system one time. That's that. I don't know if I can show you. I don't have a picture to show you, but if you want to look it up, the Atari XE system was mostly a gaming system. Atari was trying to dominate the market back in video game systems. And it also had included built-in BASIC, but it was basically primarily developed for video games, cartridges, and stuff like that. Which the Atari computer could still do the same, but they were trying to market their product in a different direction. I think that's when Atari started isolating from their other departments as well. Led unfortunately to the fall of Atari. Let's see, rack your brains. Here's some more of their. This might be Atari ST stuff. Yeah, I think this is all going to be Atari ST. Let me see here. Oh no, they got them kind of mixed up in this one. So Atari ST had not fully dominated the magazine yet, so they kind of divided them up and split and started, as it became, Atari ST became more in the scene, they started taking up more of the magazine over time. But in this one, you still see, here's some more circuits here, you still see that the Atari 800 computer, or home computer, was still, had its own place in the market at that time. There's some more examples of electronic components. If you're interested, you can check out this issue. Here's a magazine. Here's a game talking typewriter. They were common to show the picture in those days to kind of, to promote or market the magazine. Because you could buy them right off the shelf. And here's a bunch of the magazines. I do own all these right here. I'm pretty sure I owned all these issues. Yep, I own every one of these. That's not going to show them this. I'm always just showing the first, because it would take way too long to go through every single magazine. It'd probably bore people. Here's something they came out with later called the New Owners Column, and they started expanding more into the development. This one says the Atari 8-bit, 800, and 130XE, but they kind of were given a little bit more information about programming. It started with basics all the way down to the advanced stuff. I thought that was a pretty interesting series. Here's some more of their product game reviews. I own this joystick too. I never got it until I got it on eBay, but in those days, here it is. The Epix joystick. I think it's a pretty cool joystick. Let's see here. That's the printers in those days. I don't have a printer to review it, so I'm kind of skipping out. Here's some of the advertisements. Now this one was pretty cool. This right here is a guy, one of the many games designed by one of the more popular contributors to the Atari magazine. His name was J.D. Caston. He even has a Facebook if you want to check him out, J.D. Caston. And he designed all these some of the best games I'd ever seen on the Atari in the Atari ANTIC magazine. So you might want to check out his. This was a contest he set up later. Well, this was a game first he set up. And then later this evolved into a contest that people would send in their game submission screens, or the best screen, and they'd win prizes through Antic, of course. Menu Maestro, Mark. Here's where it started coming on the scene again. So they kind of moved in their section here and inserted their own stuff here. And again, just skipping over because I'm not a fanatic of the ST. No pun intended, guys, but I never owned an ST, so I can't really review it for you. Don't want to talk about something I don't have knowledge about, so kind of skipping over here and seeing if I haven't missed anything else. Some more of the product reviews. This is still Atari ST though, and of course we go back to the regular software library where you can download or type in what's called the type-in programs, of course. And here's that listing in case you're curious for the rebound. It's right here. He actually designs the screens step by step here so you can actually see him as you go through them, but he had animation and everything. Guy fully took advantage of character sets and displayless interrupts, vertical blank interrupts, you name it. This guy was on top of it, so he was moving largely quickly onto the Atari scene. So I'm going to kind of skip that one out. Now we're getting into an interesting year. Hopefully I didn't skip a year here. I think I may have, but 86, 87, I don't know. I wanted to kind of evolve. I'm going to kind of show the last section of this one. Shucks. They're all laying scattered on the floor here, and I'm trying to see them in the dark. So 87, when I just showed you, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I showed you 86, didn't I? No, I showed you 87. Okay, 87. I wanted to show this transition, what happened, and I'll put both of these up at the same time. So this one, and this one, what a transition that Antic took. I have like no room here. I'm going to knock my lamp right off the desk. So this is where Antic eventually went to the back of the magazine. And notice there's no longer an Antic magazine. So the Antic magazine didn't actually go away, but their titling and all the copyrights to that probably went away, and it got shifted to the back of the magazine, so you could still type in their programs. But for people who didn't know that, they thought the Atari had actually, or the Antic magazine had actually diminished and gone away. For example, if you were looking in a store in those days for the Antic magazine in what would that be, January of 1988, you never would have known it unless, of course, you saw maybe an extra copy there somewhere and read the magazine in the back. But it transitioned into the Start magazine. So if you want to go online, and I'll show that in a minute here, you can still get other programs still in the Start magazine at the very back for the Atari. So let's kind of move this one off, and I'll show that in a minute. And this is, of course, the last issue, the last year that Antic reigned supreme in their titling. Let's see here. I'm kind of noticing they always kept the consistency. This is still the I/O board, so they never parted from that. The Super Disc bonuses, they left those in. This is going to mostly be... Oh, here's a Dungeon arcade game. This game was pretty cool. I think I remember this one. I think that might have been a... That's probably a it was a game of the month. So you couldn't type this in. You could just get it. You ordered the disc subscription. So let's see here. I love their ads in those days. They were kind of funny. More advertisements. We kind of went over a lot of this. I'm kind of skipping over unless I see something really new here. Science Statistician. Here's the Atari ST for people who want to know what it looks like. Kind of see it there. And it was priced at $839. Who could afford that? I know I could. I was living at home and working in a restaurant. Here's a bunch of the Atari ST systems and their advertisements for it. Here's the Atari 65XE computer. This is the one that my first Atari computer I owned. And then later they came out with what's called the 130XE, which upgraded the memory from 64K to 128K. So, actually it says 1,072 bytes of RAM, but who's counting the extra bits probably for the self-startup and all that. Alright, so printers. Let's see if I see my printer on here. I think I might have on this one right here. This one looks familiar. Never paid attention here. I bought it from a friend. What is an Epson? I think about it, I really don't know. It was a pretty nice printer though. I kind of printed out directly my programs. Here's a bunch of the ST software they had in those days. Again, excuse me guys, this is not an ST review, so moving on to the Atari 800. See, ST reviews. So you can kind of see the Atari ST was already taken over the scene. ST product reviews, so they were basically moving Antic slowly out, basically, so to speak. So I guess Antic was kind of already moving kind of to the back, because a lot of their software and their programs, the 800, were moving to the back. I noticed that. So here's their type-in listings. I have a small section, it looks like. It's on a couple pages. It goes on that one, and that one. It might go a little farther. Maybe there's a little advertisement in between. Okay, yeah, there's some more here. Oh, whoops. It's so hard to hold this thing up here. like I said, you can get these online if you're not happy with the output, especially this thing not wanting to stay on here. It's one of my better magazines that doesn't want to stay open. There's some of the things they did in the back, tech tips. These are pretty cool too if you want to go online and learn some of the tips and stuff about the Atari 800 computer. They would show you they had like for sound, and people would submit their own little entries, and sometimes upgrades to the games and stuff that they had already submitted in prior issues. So those are pretty cool. So let's move on to the start, what I told you. So I'll go through it and show you. To kind of lay this out, to show you the consistency. If you look here, you see that this one goes from October, and this one goes to November. Let me see, the same issue I have on that one. 87, and this one's 1990. Oh, you know what? I actually told you that wrong. There were other Antic magazines here, and I thought something was missing on here. Like this one, which I have for 1990, that eventually this might have been, this wasn't the last issue, because this one says, what is it, October 1990, this one says February, March. I may not have the last magazine. I thought I did own it. Unless this is it right here. Let's see. December 1990. 1991, I can't see that. October 1990. That's 1989. That's 1990. Let's see. You can see my own handwriting here. Here's another one I have. I tried to put these in order. Sorry for that redirect or whatever. See, this one is October 1989. It's not that one. So maybe I didn't own. I thought I owned the last one that transitioned over. Kicked me. I thought I had it. July, August. So it would have had to have been the September issue of 1990. Let's see if this is it. This might be it. That was 89 September, I think. This one. No, this is September 1988. I guess I didn't own it, but eventually that's what happened is they transitioned over to the back of the magazine. So if you look in the back of both of these, you'll see that there's the Atari listings in the back here. They put Atari 800 computer. This one has it right here. Right here, these are all the Atari 800 listings. And they eventually removed the type-ins, and they just had them section by section, like kind of how they first started out, page by page. That's a pretty cool game right there, Monster Match, if you ever want to type in a cool one. Okay, so let's move on to this one. This video is going to be so long, I had no idea it was going to be this long. So I think I'm going to leave it just to the Antic magazine and kind of break them up that way. It's just taking too long to go through all this stuff. I'll give a brief review of the other magazines. With this one, right here, I wanted to show you this article that they wrote when they first wrote about it. Ah, shucks, where's that? Give me a second, guys. I can't see it from that angle. Right here. There you go. See what it says? Antic moves. Start actually began inside Antic for the Atari resource section, so it somehow seems fitting that Antic goes back into Start, and all of the different Atari computers are being covered in one larger monthly magazine again. For every issue left in your existing Antic 6-time yearly subscription or whatever, they're going to give you two monthly issues of Start without a disc. So that's when I think they took away the disc. So they started moving it into Start at that point, and you couldn't use a Start ST disc, Atari ST disc on an Atari 800 computer. I do know that for a fact. I don't think without any special kind of conversion, but that's what they did. They eventually moved everything into and took over their section. See, it still says Antic Atari Resource. Of course, now you wouldn't know that if you were in the store and you saw the Start magazine. But I knew that because I had a disc subscription, and they just sent me the next issue, which they just explained in that article there. So this was a pretty cool game. Somebody submitted this Kung Fu Master. There's some scientific programs, so forth. So, anyways. Kind of a long drawn-out process. See, I was fortunate though also to keep and have possession of every single Start magazine that had the Atari in the back. So there's two, and then there was two more. I think these were the last ones right here. Those were the very last ones for the disc descriptions. If you don't believe me, I'll show you in the back here. And you can look it up online, of course, but they're all still in the back of the magazine right there. Antic Atari resource. So I was pretty fortunate to get in possession of those magazines. So it's kind of cool. And I did explain I'd show the analog a little bit here. Some of the early issues I had with analog was this one. And I bought this one in a store. I had another one right here somewhere. Where did I put it? Well, this is one right here. This is one of the earlier ones I bought in the store. This one doesn't have a cover on it, but these are some of the analog Atari programs. I won't go into a lot of review, but these are some other the stuff you can find for the Atari programs. And in my opinion, even some of the better programs. They have real full display assembly listings. If you're interested in assembly, definitely check out the Analog magazine because you get full listing of assembly code. It's just totally amazing. In those days, I learned so much because I could easily go in and just kind of take apart the stuff and see what was going on. So. I'll show you the next year. Here's the January issue. I didn't show you this one, I guess, but this one didn't really have same thing. It still had their own. They had their own process, of course, different than Antic. They had their own setup of how they did things. This isn't the Analog magazine review. It's supposed to be Atari history. This was a pretty cool game. This was an assembly game, and they included the full source of this on a disc. If you ordered a disc in those days, you might be able to get it online somewhere. There's some more of their electronic component reviews of their parts. You wanted to build your own joysticks and learn about that kind of stuff. They covered in-depth a lot of stuff. So I highly recommend the Analog magazine to any Atari, die-hard Atari user. So. There's the February issue right there. Let's see if there's anything here. Here's some more of their assembly listings. If you look here again, you'll see full pages of assembly here. This is when, to kind of explain this, guys, when the Atari assembler, when the first Atari assembly became popular in those days, they started out with what was called the Atari editor or cartridge, and eventually Snap Software came up with one called the Max 65, which in my opinion was one of the best. So they started expanding their listings and probably their users' requirements for wanting to see more of those output displays, so, or output listings. So here we go. And here's where they started paying. I think they started paying people for their software. I never submitted anything to them, though. I didn't really have a full product that was completed. And some little mini dumb games I made in those days. And here's where they got into the master memory map. I showed you this earlier in that book, which I don't know where I put it. But anyways, here it is. This book right here. The map in the Atari. This kind of expanded on that and took some of the extractions from that and showed how the addressing works and what each address did and how to use those to your advantage. If you're really into in-depth assembly, you definitely learn that stuff. There's some of they had their own type-in codes. If you typed into programs and you made errors, you could type this program in and it would do what's called a checksum, where it could check it line by line by outputting numbers, which done some kind of calculation to figure that out. And it was just adding the data together or something like that, and would tell you if that number exceeded or was below, was greater, basically greater or less than a certain value, then you had an error on that line. So that's pretty helpful. Who needs that these days? You can just download anything on the internet, right? Let's see, this one had a pretty cool game. I guess that's why I wanted to show this one. This got into the scene of the action cartridge too, which I felt, because they covered a vast amount of Atari stuff, but they got into creating listings here for the action cartridge. And this was one of the cooler ones I saw for the action cartridge. I'm kind of skip ahead to where that is here. And remember, you can get these online, so don't depend on me to show you every little thing here. Where's that? Right here. Here's that Trial by Fire. Here's what it actually looked like, and it was a pretty fun game for the action. These babies would just start jumping out the windows, and you had to bounce them and get them into this ambulance. But they would come out so fast sometimes you'd miss them. They'd start coming out 2 or 3 at a time, and it'd be hard to bounce them off of your trampoline to get them into the ambulance. So it was pretty funny. And that's why it was more of a popular one. I wanted to kind of skip back here. This is they came to something called Game Design Workshop, which shows you step by step how to do some pretty advanced game. And they eventually, I noticed they evolved this from one of the earlier series that they had. This picture, this pixelized, I think this is a robot. They had this in one of the earlier, actually I saw this in the Antic magazine. But it goes into really showing you a full-fledged game, which was a Space Invaders type game. So if you follow along with that, you'll be able to see that. And here's that ML editor again. Here's some more of their electronic component reviews. Look at that, they got a full schematic on that one. Pretty cool. If you're into electronics, and I don't know what that thing's doing. That's funny, I wanted to show you this. This room, this kind of looked like one of my rooms in those days. I just had books scattered everywhere, printers, discs, you name it. That's die-hard Atari user right there. Here's a pretty cool game. This one was called Star Rider. It was written in full assembly. And you type in this listing here and it would eventually show you the game. It would run. You could directly run it, I think, through DOS like that, and you could just run it through a compile. That's a pretty cool looking game. It used to display this interrupts and all that to change the background coloring and stuff like that. And of course the text at the bottom there. And there's some more of the advertisement. So I'll probably show a few more of these because there were some that are really cool ones. Let's see. I don't know where they are. I think they were on these issues. Yeah, these two right here. So I don't know most of the analog series here, but these were 2 other ones I had. So this one, this is the October 1989 issue. It's getting so hard to move them up here again. Like I said, once again, you can get them on mine, so for those who just joined this channel. Alright, so here, contents, let's see what they have here. Skull Island, that's the one I wanted to show you. I'll kind of go through it a little bit here. Here's some kind of a clock keeper. Here's a card game. Or something, I don't know what that is. Dice game or something. This is one of the more famous contributors too. Was I'm sorry, this was the magazine editor. Excuse me, I thought he was a contributor. Clayton Wallman, he was the editor of Antic or Analog magazine. So he kind of started his whole little series there on BASIC. I'm gonna get to that game here in a minute. Here's some more assembly listings. Here's an assembly routine for speeding up programs. I believe so. Probably the player missile graphics, I'm guessing. Looks like it. Horizontal, yes, player missile graphics. And here's, once again, faithful to putting out their assembly listings, full listings. Here's some advertisements for games. This is kind of cool when somebody submitted a basic program here. Modifies character in the game. Here's some of the more popular games in this series. LA SWAT. I bought this one with the Panther before. It's pretty cool. Here's a game I wanted to show you, Skull Island. This thing rocked, man. It was a text adventure, but it actually included a pretty nice display here, and they set up like a little cursive display here. And the game, it was so well thought out. It was so neat. It was like you were stuck on this island or whatever, and you had to get off this island. Probably a mission to save somebody, I imagine. Let's see what it says. 2 years of program, problem solving, testing, and retesting were spent to create Skull Island. Let's see. Just kind of seeing what it's about here. You find yourself trapped on an island somewhere in the South Pacific. Yeah, it's escape the island. It says right there, didn't escape Skull Island, so you have to escape off the island, try to get a boat or something. And you encountered stuff like sharks and all kinds of stuff in that game. That was pretty cool. And here's the rest of the listing for that other game. So I wanted to show you this one too. I know this video is going to be so long. People are going to be complaining about how long it is, I imagine. Here's another cool assembly game to learn from if you want to learn about this playlist. I use this one a lot when I was developing my game. Has some pretty good setup here. This one kind of goes side by side though, in the way the magazine was laid out, so they could get more on a page. I think eventually they started going that route. Yeah, they did. I noticed this one's consistent with the other one. There's some more of their action listings. I don't know if I showed the other one that had a listing of it. This one shows the listing there. Sharpshooter. That might have, maybe that was Atari ST. Let me see. I think it was action. I never really programmed in action, so I can't really tell the difference. But anyways, in case you're curious. Where is it at? It was a really cool. And here's some of the cartridge games they had in those days. I don't know where it went to. I have to go look it up in the contents directory again here. I think that was probably the listing I just showed you. Maybe that was it. I skipped ahead real quick there, but maybe it wasn't in this issue, but there was a really cool game they had. It was like a text adventure, and it wasn't in basic because the other one I showed you wasn't basic, and this one wasn't assembly. I think I was had the wrong issue. Confused. Well, maybe it wasn't in that issue, guys. Sorry about that. Well, here it is. It's actually back a few issues. So, this is the one I wanted to show you. We'll jump back a little bit of time here. The June 1989 issue. They had this game called Secret Agent, which was written in assembly for the Atari 800 computer. I'm trying to find out where it starts here. Maybe it starts over here somewhere. I'm going to kind of show you this display and everything. Here's their picture, their startup, and here's what it looked like. They done a cursive display, but this was a pretty cool game. It was well thought out, and you can't really see it here, but you can get it online, so check it out there. I've been watching the screen, so I don't know if these are all coming in clear or not. I tried to move up the camera. Again, you get full listing displays for assembly. I said that's basically all I wanted to show you on that one. So you kind of wrap it up here. Some of the other Atari magazines that came on in those days was the Atari Explorer. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details. You can get these online too, I imagine. These ones had some other little programs that people wrote, and had some tips in here which I kind of found interesting and stuff like that, so I didn't really want to go into a whole lot of detail. Mostly they had pretty cool game reviews in the back. I think that's what caught me, is when I saw these game reviews here for Panther and stuff like that. I was kind of decided to buy the magazine. Didn't really have a whole lot of, program, mostly utility. I think these were kind of focused on the business market. I know there were never really no games in here. That's an Atari ST game there. The software was pretty cool. Look at these. I mean, for those days, the ST wasn't doing pretty bad, so. But I think they had the Amiga in here too, somewhere. There's Xenophobe. That was a pretty cool game. And if there's any of the other ones, I guess there's nothing really in that one. So, some of the stuff that Atari did in those days. Miss Westward Ho. This is the one I bought this for. I wanted to start learning about my own text adventures and stuff like that. And this one kind of led me into the process of learning how to design an actual text adventure. Although this one wasn't a very in-depth one, but it had a pretty good AI to it, I'd say. So. And the only one I really owned was this one. I think this was probably more of a business one, which is the Atari interface. I'm going to cut this off. I know this video is getting so long. This had some product reviews, and it had some actually their demos and stuff like that, live demoing. I can't remember what they call that stuff. Their shows. I kind of learned some of the information about Atari in these magazines too. See what was going on outside of their gaming, and see where they were going. This is before the internet, so we couldn't look stuff up online, guys. We had to use magazines and library resource material to learn stuff. The internet was not still there. There was a BBS, but it was not where you could really read entire listings of people and see actual pictures. They didn't have image formats in those days, so none of that was available. So anyways, this was kind of a long one, but I just thought I'd kind of give you an idea of how the Atari evolved, how the magazines evolved. I know I kind of skipped it, I didn't show it, but there's also Compute Magazine kind of had their own type in listings, and I do own several copies of those too. They have their own little, you can get these issues online, so if you're interested. They supplied program outputs for the not only the Atari, but for the Commodore 64, the IBM, the Apple, and the Amiga. They kind of followed every single computer along its line. So I hope this video was insightful. Maybe not from a programming perspective, but maybe it'll help you understand how the Atari changed their generation and how the magazines evolved in those days and what was changing the processes during those times. So thanks for watching, guys, and if you're interested in subscribing, go ahead and definitely subscribe. So have a good day.